real word is outshining or effulgence. So who being the outshining of the nature of God, that is Jesus Christ. The next part. Who being the brightness of his glory and the express image of his person. The word express image in the Greek is character. And I would like to think it's the only space in the whole Bible where the word character is used. But here it says...
No, it was in Genesis. God made man with his image and like...
Right, alright.
Yeah,
So,
the image is
the image, character, right? Using the word character. So, who being the brightness of his glory and the express image, right? Or character of his person. The person of God again is the nature of God, or the essence of God. Right?
The actual word is essence.
Essence. So here we see Jesus Christ being identified as the outshining of the glory of God and the character of the nature of God. The nature of God is invisible. It is how to say the spiritual law, right? So Jesus Christ as the character of God. Is it his physical body that is being spoken of here? No. It can't be, right? Because the physical body is not the outshining of the divine nature which is invisible. So here we see Jesus Christ being identified as the character of God, right? Or the nature of God, the character of the nature of God. Turn to John now, chapter 14. Let me see what that Jesus Christ is. That is the character of God. If you understand what that's the John chapter 14. And verse 6, right? We read verse 6. It says, Jesus saith unto him, I am the way. That is not the physical body of Jesus being identified here. The truth and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. So here Jesus is being identified as the truth. But he is also identified in Hebrews as the character of God, or the outshining of the glory of God. So then, in terms of what is character, 2 John verse 9.
Yes. Doctrine of Father and Son.
Second John and verse 9.
Amen.
It says, whosoever transgresseth and abideth not in the doctrine of Christ hath not God. He that abideth in the doctrine of Christ, he had both the Father and the Son. Right? Amen. So he has the nature of God and he has the character of God which Jesus Christ is. But in terms of what really is the character, Jesus says that he is the truth, right? And to be the character or the outshining of the glory of God and be the truth. It means the character of God is the truths, right? That God is, or the truths of God. The truths that Jesus Christ is, right? Some would say the doctrine of Christ is the same thing. The truths that Jesus Christ is, the doctrine of Christ, right? That is the character or the outshining of the glory of God. So, what is character? What is character? Right? The character of God would be the truths of Jesus Christ, which is the same truths of the divine nature, or the knowledge, the truth knowledge of the divine nature. So, in terms of character, character really is the knowledge, identity of an individual. It is not a physical body, but it is the knowledge that you are That is what character is.
Yeah, but based on your Bible definition, there must be a knowledge of truth.
No, hold on. The character of God. Jesus Christ is the character of God.
Which is?
Right? Jesus Christ is the character of God.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ is the truth.
Right, which is a knowledge.
Right.
Right.
So the truths of Jesus Christ, or the divine truths that Jesus Christ is,
right,
that is the character of God. It's the knowledge of God.
Right. So the word character there in its original sense
means it means the knowledge that God is. Right? That is the character of God.
Yes.
So the knowledge that you are, right? Not the physical body, the knowledge that you are.
Yeah.
That is what character is. That is your character.
Yeah, but I'm still seeing, I understand what you're saying there, Brother Samuel, but I'm still seeing, in my mind, I'm still seeing a difference.
And then how you mean that difference?
Difference, just remember you used God to explain that, right? The knowledge of God in the character.
Yes.
Right. So a person before having been born without God. So in other words, knowledge is used there to explain who God is. And it's not just in a vacuum saying that because who God is. It is much more than that. It is a knowledge of the truth of what is truth, the only truth in the universe.
And that is the character of God.
And then God created human being. Right. So the question on it that was asked early on is that in the case of Adam and Eve, before sin, what human character they had?
What human character?
Yeah, because they were human beings as well.
Before we go there, right? Here is this. In Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 1, we see the character of God is the truth that Jesus is. And Jesus is God. So the character of God is the truths or the doctrines of Christ, right? That reveals God.
Right.
It is the identity knowledge of God.
Right.
So in terms of character, not character of who, in terms of character, character is identity knowledge of whether it's God or whether it's Brother Preston or whoever it is. So what is character? Character is the identity knowledge of somebody. So hold on. If someone is to explain to me, right, or tell me about Brother Michael, and Brother Michael is not present, what they would give is a knowledge that identifies Brother Michael. That knowledge that identifies Brother Michael is the character of Brother Michael. So, right. So if it is, right, if it is somebody in the world, there's a criminal, there's a thief, and somebody come to tell you, boy, you had a man in your place, boy, or you had a man in your place, he's not there, and they give you a knowledge that identifies that individual, that knowledge will be the character or the identity knowledge of that individual.
So give us knowledge of identifying
Brother Michael? Amen. But Brother Michael is the brother, right, in Christ, who does, well, what some would say he's a Simeonite in terms of his tribe, right? He very, to say, and given a knowledge that identifies Brother Michael, right? Which is, yeah, but a knowledge that identifies Brother Michael could include his tribal traits. Because if at the end of the day, when I present it, they get in their mind, Brother Michael, then there's a knowledge that identifies Brother Michael.
Give a knowledge identifying that.
Brother Michael, well, from what I hear, okay, I will give a knowledge about me, I wouldn't give about Brother Michael. When I was unconverted, I was the son of Albert Lian, right?
That is a genetic identity.
It is a knowledge that identifies me, right? But with God, you don't have no genetics in terms of God. So you will get the truths that Jesus is, or the divine truths of Jesus, that is the identity knowledge of God. So
The knowledge it just gives is the
in the
character.
end is a knowledge that identifies the individual.
This is
Be
correct.
it God, but it's the truth, right? And if it's for human beings, it's still the knowledge that identifies the individual, right?
Anyhow, because of time going on, it's making make sense.
Brother Michael, I want to say something. Oh no, just no. We can't take Brother Michael. Not wrong, Brother Paul wants to just say something. Give him a chance, Brother Michael.
Just have peace, Brother Paul.
Don't loud, right? Okay.
I just drive by.
Right? And you have a character in the world, which is not the true character. So since you have a character modeled after Christ, God is the one who formed the character, or give you the character, right? To be called a character that is not formed by God, a character, or considered a character.
That's the real point. That's the real
Okay, we'll get the answer.
Okay, brethren, settle down. Let's see how
Change the topic.
is that identity, knowledge of the truth, and presented by Brother Samuel, right? It is our way that person identify. If the knowledge is error, how could you identify the person by that error? If you understand what I'm saying, if the knowledge is error, it is not true. Right? The knowledge is error. How will you identify the person? Since the knowledge is error, it's not fact, it's not in existence. What are you using the knowledge to identify the person? Right? And then when they're given an explanation of a person, what will be the explanation of the person's personality or the way the person behaves? You'll identify the person by. You understand? If you say, Brother Michael is so, you identify a habit, a behavior as a habit with Brother Michael. Like Brother Michael is getting vexed fast, that's a behavior as a habit. That is identifying a personality or a trait with Brother Michael. When it comes to character, character is truth. Character is truth. See that? It's truth, right? When a person is identified having character, is when the truth of Christ affects that person. You understand? When the truth of Christ has an identity within them, an identity by the live by, or the person is identity, or the person is identified by the truths of the live by. You understand? Because when I was thinking about it, right, and the reason why I asked the question, when I was thinking about it, the reason why I asked the question, give a definition between character and personality. A proper definition is that we can make a distinction between character and personality. If a person has personality, that's a behavior as a habit. You understand? Or that is the trait being manifested as a habit. But when a person has character, a person has the truth of Christ by which they live by. That is an identity the person lives by. And the identity the person lives by is the truth of the plan of salvation. But when you're giving the person now a character, right, saying to the person the knowledge, right, because character is a knowledge identity. If the knowledge is error, and the knowledge is false, and the knowledge is not true, what is the character? That is the other comment in the definition.
What is in my mind is what? We only have character when Christ gave us his character, right? Apart from that, when you're given a knowledge about somebody, just to explain the characteristics about that individual. That is all. Characteristics and character to me is two different things.
What I see what I see is on a subjective direction, right? We know we have two entities. By nature, God is God. Our nature is creation. What makes Kwame different from me is character, but his nature is creation. God have a nature and he have a character. His character is the identity that he is. That shows who he is. He's God by nature. We have a nature, but what makes Kwame different from me is his character. How I see it, if somebody is unconverted, they have a bad character. That is how I see it.
Since what makes him different from you, the character, what are you looking for to be different?
If we use traits, personality, like for instance, what? Like what? Give an example. Well, for instance, Indian. Why I say that? Why I say that? When you take a character, remember pre-show, the character is like an identity knowledge. So how I see it, it's taken in consideration everything about the person. Okay, it's a holistic thing with character.
Okay, just quickly, one quick relationship. Brother Samuel here. What's the difference between him and you?
Well, plenty things are different by.
No, I mean like you can't say like Brother Tommy just means what?
Lillian, no, that's
Right.
his age.
Right, okay. In other words, where this problem is always identifying character. Right? You see, because the word character has been used broad to touch many things, that's where the confusion comes in with us. Now, if we are establishing the truth, we have to make differences in different things, and we have to stop using some words to identify things that is not best identified. For instance, when you say bad character, I just want anyone just to give a quick example of one portion of a bad character. Like what? When you explain it now, see what you are saying. But like what? Right, he says a person is always thinking evil all the time. That's everybody. Unconverted, I mean, every unconverted person.
All of them are bad character.
Okay, watch.
So what there is the character? The thinking of the evil?
Everything. Right?
So then that will mean we have the same unconverted us have the same character.
No, we have the character of Jesus Christ because we think it right.
Right, and when I say we, what I mean as human beings. I didn't mean we as Christians, right? But let me just say something. Okay. So let's just get this clear. So you identifying a person down there and you say that character over here. Right? Okay? When you say that character over here, and you want to identify that character as bad, do you identify him as he thinks evil all the time? Nobody really does that. Nobody leaves.
I look for his sinful traits as a habit. I look for his lifestyle as a habit.
Right. No, that is the point.
And that's why I
No, that is the point. Give an example now. Not something general, which is like all of us. Who are unconverted.
Smoking.
I'm sorry. Say that again? Smoking. Smoking. Alright, so you're identifying a bad health habit as a character, a bad character.
part of the person's character.
Nice, something.
But they can stop that.
No, like you see what? This is what I'm saying. The smoking is not the character of the person.
Right.
No, it's just a bad health habit that an unconverted person has. Right, now she says a liar. What means she? I told you, our teeth, beautiful. Right, you see, this is what I'm saying. Whenever you're starting to identify bad character, you identify sinful behavior.
Liar.
Right, but let us see. You see, hold on. You see, this is what I'm keep saying. When you now try to give the example, you will begin to see what you're doing. When you want to say a bad character, the only thing you are identifying is a sinful behavior. Right, so while a bad character is in the sense sinful, right, or as a habit, right? A bad character is in itself sinful to identify the behavior as the character is not sensible. And I'll tell you why. Right, you see, that's what I'm saying. One has to identify this. We take Christ as the standard, and from Christ we look at everything and see what we see. What is the character of Christ?
Holiness.
The plan of salvation. Right, the plan of salvation. And the doctrine of Christ. The gospel of Christ. The shape, the plan of salvation, that's the character of Christ. Okay. So now, let's look at a wicked person. A wicked person becomes converted. He is given the character of Christ. The point is, what was the human character he had, or what was the character he had before he was converted? All you could say to identify his character is sinful behavior. Now, if you want to identify any other thing in him, you can now begin to identify personality traits. You can say, the snobbish person there. The person who likes to snub plenty people. Or the person who is always angry. In other words, what you're doing, you're identifying the personality of the person. You see, what you identify is the personality. Now, if you try to identify character anywhere there, three things you'll have to do. You'll have to either identify the physical person, the wrong the person is doing, the sinful practice of the person, or you're going to have to identify the what you call the personality, which is sinful. Go ahead.
Question, right? Like a sinful person, or a person who lives in sin. They may have a personality where they're kind, but we know it is selfishness in the heart. It's not genuine kindness.
Right, but you will say a kind personality. Right,
they're soft, they're giving. Right? And you have a next person who have the kind of mind, but they're aggressive, they're rowdy. They don't give nobody nothing, they're selfish. You can openly see that. Look at them, two of them sinful, but different personalities.
Beautiful!
Right.
That's the point.
So what I'm saying,
beautiful.
But look, what you identify as the personality is how the person relate, even though they have the carnal mind.
Beautiful.
But when I look at the traits, it's sinful character. That's what I did to be
But hold on. As they say personality, then you go to traits. The word traits there really means the personality there when they spoke here. Or they say, when I see the sinful traits, you point back to the personality. When they say, I see the sinful traits, you point back to the personality. So what you just call the traits is the what? The personality you just say, you're coming up. One step. One quick step. All right, go ahead.
Are you saying that character and personality or traits I'm asking, right? I'm asking him if he's saying that character and traits is two different things.
Let's start up and show your voices now.
Right. When Brother Medina referred to the plan of salvation, Jesus Christ is the character of God, right? Which is the doctrine of Christ is the character of God or the plan of salvation. And while he was saying that, in my mind I think when we come to Christ we are given the plan of salvation, which is the character, right? It is given to us. And because that knowledge is given to us, we develop certain traits, right? Or we develop certain traits, right? What I'm asking him is if he is saying that character, which is the knowledge, is different from personality traits.
Exactly so. Exactly so. Let me just show you something. The same, the divine nature, right? Let's rule this out, okay? You have the divine character. The divine character is the plan of what? Salvation. Okay. But there is something called human. Yes.
Just explain what is the plan of salvation.
Okay.
Something about the plan of salvation.
Anybody understands the plan of salvation, it will include the doctrines of grace, the doctrines of salvation. It will include provisions. It will include the teachings of prevenient grace. It will include the teachings of the death of Christ. It will include the teachings of the resurrection of Christ, the teachings of the investigative judgment. All those truths that make up the plan of salvation is called the divine character. Those truths reveal the divine nature, which is the spiritual law. Okay? Beautiful, right? Right, so notice this. You and Brother Kwame have the same divine character, of course. But yet still there's a difference in the two of you all. We're not talking about the individuality doesn't explain it. It's more, that will be more vague. I want something to explain it. Right, what's the difference? The difference is in your human character. Right? So your human character, which we identify, you see, when they say human character, it is what your human character is what you call your personality. Now I'm saying, we usually call all character. In the 1800s, they used to use the word character to mean all, but it was not proper explanation. But now that we are now trying to be clearer, point by point, we need to make a division. We're not going to call divine nature character. Some people say you need to have the nature of God and they mean the character of God. And when they say character of God, they don't mean the divine character, which is the plan of salvation. But when we see the divine nature, we know that it's different to the what? The divine character. Because the divine character was not revealed as the plan of salvation before sin. Now the character that God shows himself to the universe now is what? plan of salvation. But the divine nature is still the same. Okay? Unchanged, right? Now we have something called human character. Now what is the human character? That is the point, right? Brother?
Before you go on, Madam Molina, could we say divine character, plan of salvation, is the personality?
That is what I'm saying. There's a difference between the divine character, which is the plan of salvation, and the human character, which is your personality.
Personality of God.
No, what I'm asking, if the divine character, plan of salvation, isn't that the personality of God?
Or you want to know if the plan of salvation is the personality of God?
Of God.
No, you can't call it the divine character or the plan of salvation the personality of God. Okay? The personality of God is what we call the grace of God. What we call the grace of God is mercy, is kindness, is long suffering, and so on. That is the personality of God. Okay? Now notice this. You may have the truth of Christ, the plan of salvation in you, and it calls you in a situation to be long suffering. So what are you developing here? Long sufferingness. That is not the divine word. Character, but it is the divine character making you develop what? Long suffering. So now, in your human character, a person will find it is bear long. You understand what I'm saying? What they are looking at, what they call your human character, your bearing long, is your personality. So we are taking the terms to use it because it helps us explain better. So when you say your personality, this one has a long-suffering personality or long-suffering human character. Okay? Now, for instance, Brother Kwame and Brother Samuel have grown up in two different environments and they face different things. For Brother Samuel, the emphasis on him may be long-suffering, right? But the emphasis on Brother Kwame may be kindness. You see, so some people have various shades of kindness, various shades of long-suffering. Now let's look at the unconverted person now, with regards to the kindness and the long-suffering. With human character, sometimes a person could see something called kindness and mimic it. But it is not genuine. You understand? It's not genuine because it wasn't developed by faith. Right? In like manner, right? That is why we have to make a difference here. We're talking about when it comes from Christ. So you come to Christ as a person who has normally been long-suffering in the world. You've normally been taken and you come to Christ. Now you see the truth. Now you see why you should be long-suffering. So now through the truths of Christ, you apply to that trait. And you live the trait. Or the personality, as we would call it. Or the human character. So the point I'm simply saying again is to make a difference and to make clarity, you have to show divine nature, what else? Divine character and what else? Human character or your what? Your personality. Now here's what Mrs. White tells us. Mrs. White also speaks about the human character must be developed. And she always speaks about the graces that you're supposed to have. Okay? Ephesians chapter 3, the last verse. It just comes from the person seen by all. The person, what is the person seen by all? That's a good person. What does it say? The last verse? Sorry, my mistake. It's chapter 4, I mean. Sorry, chapter 4. So somebody preaching for it. Read it for us.
Okay, Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 32, and it says, and be ye kind one to another.
Kind. That's human character.
Right.
And also that's your personality. Go ahead.
Tender-hearted.
Another one again. That is easy to appeal to. A person is easy to appeal to. easy to reach. You understand? A person doesn't have to beg before you do something good for them. Go ahead, so tender-hearted. Go ahead.
Forgiving one another.
That's just some behavior now.
Even as God, for Christ's sake, hath forgiven you.
Right, okay. Right. So what we see here now is kind of the tender-heartedness. He said that's how we should be towards each other. Okay? But remember, a person can be kind and tender-hearted without Christ. All I'm to do is to practice it as a habit. Right, so when you say your character is what? Your thoughts and emotions as a habit. Watch me now. When you say your character is your thoughts and emotions as a habit, first let us deal with the divine character. The Bible says, let this mind be in you, which was also in what? The actual Greek word is let this what? Thought be in you. So that's the truths of Christ as the thoughts of Christ. And then that affects what? Your emotions. So your thoughts and your emotions there, right? Your thoughts being the thoughts of Christ, and your emotions affected by the thoughts of Christ as a habit is called, sometimes we call it the character of Christ. But you must remember this important thing. What makes that the character of Christ is not the emotions, but the thoughts of the truth, which is the mind of Christ. Now come to your human character. Thoughts and emotions as a habit. Sometimes a person is thinking very, very selfish, and they practice selfishness. When a person looks at you, they say there's a selfish person. You can't identify it clearly here because basically everybody is selfish who's uncomfortable. But now, if you use the word personality, the word personality means what is seen in a person, what is expressed in a person as a habit. Let me give you an illustration here. All right, okay? Okay. No, I can't use anybody here. Okay? Okay. Okay, I wouldn't say anybody here. Okay? But all right. Here you're talking about a person. And that person has what we call, they're always easy to talk to. Always easy to appeal to. Always easy for them to appeal to them to help someone. And it is because of the truths of Christ. What you're identifying here is a tender-hearted person. The personality, in other words, when you say personality, you're seeing in his person tender-heartedness. That's what the word personality means. So we are just taking English words to try to explain certain things. But I'm saying, if you want clarity, better you use terms to identify and don't mix it up. Make it clear. Divine nature, what else? And what else?
Human character.
Which is what?
Personality.
And that way you will get a much more clarity in everything. Now, when it comes to tribal traits now,
Human character is personality.
right, the human character is a personality. Now somebody asks, do you have a bad, when you have a bad character?
How about personality?
A bad personality? Hold on. You see, but when you say that, you already fall in that trap. This is what I'm trying to show. Watch it again. So when you say bad character, bad human character, you say a bad what? Personality. But if you say a bad character, since you already identified the knowledge of Christ as a character, you're not looking at, when you say human character, they call it bad, you're not looking at error. While you're looking at the truth here as the divine character, when you say a bad human character, you're not looking at the error. Because remember, you're dealing with the human character, which is the what? Personality. So you're not dealing with the error. Let me show you why you're not dealing with the error. Watch this illustration. What am I showing here?
Your hand.
What am I showing here?
Your hand.
No, that's my foot.
No, it's your hand.
It's my foot.
It's your hand, I tell you.
You see that? That's what you see.
No, this is my pen.
It's your hand.
No, but this is my shirt.
No,
what he's saying.
Right, here is what, no, that's what error is. Error is not real. It's not true. You take something and you identify it. It is not true, it is not real. You can't have a character, a bad character, as a knowledge when it is not real. Take any error. Let me give you an error here. Let me give you an error. Shiva is God.
Okay, not real.
Shiva gave knowledge to save us. They don't have a Shiva and he didn't give what? Any knowledge to save us. That can't be a bad character. That's the false doctrine you have and it's sin. But through believing in Shiva, you might become a very selfish person. So those your personality has extreme selfishness. You see, so the point about it is you have to be careful. If you say the divine character is the plan of salvation, to say a bad character is error, you fall into a mistake here. Because a personality of a person is not the same as an error. Because a person may be kind in the personality and they be the most deceptive person when it comes to the knowledge you have. It's like a Mormon. Very, very nice in their behavior. Or watchtower. Very generous in their behavior. Or very generous as a personality, a generous personality. That's what I should say. I shouldn't say behavior. Generous personality. But error. Which one are you going to call the bad character? You see, so this is what I'm saying, you have to be very careful. Because when you're going now and saying, well, divine character, plan of salvation. Bad character, if you don't see it as the personality, you'll have to see it as the error. That is different to the plan of salvation. And when you do that, you will get into trouble. Because a person is going to present some error, but they're going to have a nice personality.
As to the definition of the word character, right? Given the explanation what I Samuel gave for Hebrews 1, you could put in that there.
The definition that Brother Samuel gave in Hebrews, it was just to identify what was character. Nice. Character as what unfolds or reveals the divine nature. What unfolds or reveals the divine nature. Alright? That's what he was showing. Okay? The actual Greek for the word character is engraving. Let me show you what I mean by engraving. Watch. Engraving among those Greeks and Hebrews. Watch. I'm doing something here. Watch this. That's a Greek word. Yes. What is it? Yes. Right, this is the Greek alphabet. Right? What do you have here is an engraving. Look how it's shaped. It's shaped this way and it's shaped this way. What? Okay, you see how it's shaped, right? That is how it's shaped. You see? Engraving. Now this engraving is putting a thought in your mind. You get the idea? So the word character is an engraving that puts a thought in your mind. Right? And that is what is used to identify the light that comes from Christ. That is the engraving that puts thoughts in your mind. Well, a person who is unconverted cannot have a character. If a person is unconverted and has a character, if you say they have a bad character, then you're pointing out to their what? Their personality. Not the knowledge, not the error that causes the personality. Now, if you want to say bad character, and you want to say character in harmony with divine character, then you have to say bad knowledge. And that way it will not be just identifying the what? Personality, but the what? The knowledge. So the person can be very, very kind in their personality, but teaching one set of error. And that is the danger. So that's why you have to be very careful.
So character is only knowledge.
Right, so the character of Christ that you're supposed to have is the knowledge that Christ is.
So character is not
knowledge of the Father.
It depends. If you're speaking about God, character is the knowledge. If you're speaking about human being, a created thing, it is a personality. Because the knowledge you... Let me tell you something. Watch it, watch. Watch is one thing. Watch is one thing. When God created man, or let us say angels and other beings, and there wasn't a sin, did they all have characters? What character they had? Did they have personality? Yes, they have personality, of course. Right? Beautiful. Right? So when error comes now, you can't identify the error as the character, the bad character. It's not real, it's not true, it's not factual. What you have to identify as bad now is the personality.
Something
exactly. Okay, what's a wrong knowledge in that person's mind? They call for a day of prayer. A week of prayer to do the prayer.
A week.
Watch me. The Muslim man going and pray. Right? Allah Akbar, he says of
killing people in Africa.
What is he saying? A moon god is great. Is that moon god?
No.
That's what the concept is not what? True.
False knowledge.
You can't call that bad knowledge a bad character. It's not real. But what about the haughtiness of him? Because a trait that Muslims get, or a personality they get from that knowledge is actually haughtiness. So the haughtiness you would call you what? Personality. Or a bad character.
The knowledge separate from the deed.
From the personality. Not the deed. Haughtiness. Haughtiness in the book.
What's the difference between the knowledge of somebody's personality and somebody's personality, if it have a difference?
He wants to know the difference between the knowledge of a person's personality and the
personality, if it have a difference.
And the personality.
Purposes.
Okay. Here is again where it comes back to what you did before. If I say, describe that man's character, okay, and we're talking about how to converted person. The first thing you would have to say is not how we look physically or what. You have to say that haughty individual. You identify a personal trait or a personality that the person has. And when you do that, the knowledge that you're saying is that that person is haughty, but he's not the only haughty one. So you will be at a loss to identify a character of an individual and for it to be individual. Why? Because unconverted people don't have character. So what we call their character is really the what? Personality. And personality is not limited to just one person.
Amen.
Then the Bible didn't say one of you all alone develop kindness. How much of us supposed to have it? Right. You see, that's why you'll get into it. You'll constantly get yourself into trouble because you'll be constantly trying to explain, right? Identify a person and say to identify their bad character, and the only thing you will be able to point out is their personality. But you will get in a problem because there are other people that have the same one, bad one, personality. So then it's not the individual. So this is what I'm saying. Unconverted people do not have what? Character. That is why the term law, that's what the term loss means. You know what the term loss means? Here's what the term loss means. Your born again self is the character of Christ that is supposed to live. Your born again self is the character of Christ that is supposed to live. Anybody who is not converted, they don't have the born again self or the character of Christ. And that's what loss means. It means what was supposed to be yours in conversion is forever lost. So they call you what? Lost. Notice a person standing in front of you and you know where he's living and you're calling him what? Lost. Why? Because what's supposed to be his, the character that's supposed to be his, it is lost to him. He doesn't know it, he hasn't found it. So they call it lost. So this is what I'm saying again. Be very careful because when you're trying to explain yourself in these things, you'll run into problems and confuse yourself more. Okay, so the two questions, sister, and then your for me, and then afterwards, this is Sarah before that.
Yes, you know what you now said there, that was upon my mind, right? So we only see our true identity in our born again self. So before that is false knowledge and deception, right? And really and truly, for Christ to give it to us means that we didn't have it in the first place. So we only get it in our born again self. That's when we see our true identity, which really we're supposed to be getting. So as you say, if we don't accept that, we'll lose out. And we'll always be a false way if we continue that way.
Beautiful. She's speaking about you only have your born again self, which is your true identity when you become converted. And that is true, right?
Could you point out my human character?
Brother Kwame asked me if I could point out his human character. As a Christian. Right?
Yeah.
Yes, as a Christian. Okay.
But you can point out my personality.
Well, yes, I can put that in personality.
So then, because what I got in human character is really in knowledge, in his mind. Because they say, they can't...
Well, let me point out your knowledge. I'm pointing out his human character or his knowledge. Jesus Christ died to save us.
That's what he just said.
Justification is the change that it brings in us. Look, I just pointed out. But that's the character of Christ.
So human character really is the character of Christ. That's
conclusion.
He says, so human character therefore is the character of Christ. So then if you don't have the character of Christ, you don't have one.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. So if you don't have the character of Christ, you don't have character. But what will you point out as bad in the person? Personality. Amen. Amen. Okay. You're coming up now and watch me. It is now 12:17. Watch me, 12:17, and watch me. Giving you all 10 minutes. Right? So, Pan Sandra, 10 minutes. Because today we must start tragedy and you'll be shocked.
Alright, brethren, let us have our closing prayer for Revelation class, you know. Sister Sandra come to the song service, right? Let us pray, brethren. Loving Father, we thank you once again, dear Lord, for your truths that you have revealed unto us, O God. Thank you, Father, for the understanding in regards to the divine character, which is the plan of salvation, as it relates to our human personality. Dear Father, as we accept this divine character, making it become our human character, Father. Lord, I thank you very much, dear Father, for all these wonderful truths. You continue to bless us. Bless our dear brother in our midst, dear Lord. Continue to poem the truths, dear Father, all of us, so that, oh Lord, we can correct all the effects, dear Lord, in our human personality, oh Father. Thank you once again, dear Lord, brethren. Continue to bless us all. It's our humble prayer. Much thanksgiving unto you. Amen. Amen.